All right, we're back here on Community Focus. Glad you could join us here today. We're going to talk a little bit now about agriculture, well, farming in Nelson County. And I got with me one of the preeminent people that knows things. Don't laugh. I mean, when I think about farming and what's going on in Nelson County, I think of Adam Wheatley. So, Adam, thank you for being here today.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the offer.
And I know you're mostly into the beef cattle business, I believe.
Well, I raised my wife and family. We raised registered breeding stock beef cattle.
Yeah.
But now my wife's family is into grain. I mean, my brother-in-law and nephews and her family are some of the predominant grain producers throughout the area, not just Nelson County, but in 2 or 3 counties.
Right. So if
we're involved with a little bit of everything.
So if we was having this conversation 40, 50 years ago, I mean, farms would be the product in Nelson County in this area. I mean,
and at that time, most of the farms dabbled in all the areas. By that I mean grain and tobacco and beef and pork and some poultry even.
Yeah.
And now everybody's more specialized just because of the way technology has come along and the equipment. It costs so much to go all in that it's hard to be as diversified as we once were. But typically, 40 plus years ago, the farms and the local farms were much more diversified than they are now.
Well, tobacco farms are becoming a lot more scarce now. I guess they're becoming more of a, I won't say corporate, but you don't see the little tobacco patches
because there's a lot of hoops to jump through if you're going to produce tobacco.
Yeah.
It's very labor intense. The marketing has become very difficult. A lot of the people that are producing tobacco, if you don't have a signed contract with the buyers, it's hard to get the good price and the premium dollar for your product. So you work all year long, virtually all year. I mean, tobacco, you think about, you set it in May, you cultivate it and care for it June and July, and then you harvest it September, October, in that time frame, and then you strip it in the winter.
Yeah.
So it is really a year-round job, but without the signed agreement and the guaranteed price, it's hard to produce that and make a living on it.
Let's just stick with beef cattle just for a second. I'm sure there's a lot of forecasting and marketing that goes into that. I mean, you're not just going to go out and raise 1,000 beef cattle.
No, and the thing about cattle, it's a long haul type business because a cow is pregnant for 9 months. All right, she nurses that baby for 6 to 7 months. And then, depending on the use of that calf, whether it goes into a breeding operation or whether it goes into the food chain, you've got another year involved with that animal. And then it hopefully stays, if it goes into a breeding process, the females stay in the herd till they're 8, 10, 12 years old, and the bulls till they're 7 or 8.
Yeah.
So it is a long-term investment, and the market does not fluctuate in it because the life cycle is one of the things. Like in hogs, the life cycle is short.
Yeah.
A sow, a female hog, can have 2 litters of 8, 10, 12 pigs a year. A cow typically has 1 calf every 12 months, so it takes longer for the herd to build. But now liquidation can occur real quick depending on price and the supply of feed, which right now we're getting all kinds of rain, but if in a drought circumstance.
Well, I remember a few years ago, we was having a drought circumstance, and people were talking about they were selling off their beef cow. Well, they were coming into the food chain itself, and they were really worried that they weren't going to have any beef cattle in the future.
Well, there's been several drought cycles over the last 30 years. Most of us, my age group, remember 1983. 1983 was a rough year.
Yeah.
And then more recently, in 2007 and 2008, we had 2 dry years back to back, and it really decreased the beef herd and the dairy herds in central Kentucky because pasture was short because of the drought, and then that resulted in hay being not only short, but if you had it, it was very expensive. So there was a great deal of liquidation in the herd that took about in 2007 and 2008. And then a year or two after that, grain prices really skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And that resulted in more people selling out because if you're close to your retirement age and cow prices are pretty high and feed is really high, so it costs more to feed them if you're going to feed the young stuff. Plus, if you're going to rent that ground out for crop, the income potential was greater. There were a lot of people that were at that age limit or that stage in their life where they decided, we're going to liquidate now while we can get the most for our animals and also the most return from our land.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that brings you to the other end of the spectrum. Obviously, when somebody goes to the grocery store or somewhere like that, the beef prices up or down depending upon like a lot of things you said.
It's all supply and demand. It's supply and demand. So from that 2007, 8, and 9 years, from that span, the cow herd shrunk. Mm-hmm. So when the cow herd shrinks, the supply is low, and even if the demand stays the same, the prices start going up, and then that puts pressure both ways. So when the prices go up, we'll cut these herds even more because it's more profitable. So your herd shrinks for 3 or 4 or 5 years in a row. And then because, again, of that calf taking a year or two to get in production, it takes a long time to build that herd back up.
So more cattle, the beef prices stay. Where are we at right now? And where are we going? Where are we
We
headed?
are actually slightly building.
Uh-huh.
Okay, 2014 saw a 2.5 or 3% increase in the cow herd. Now, for the 4 or 5 years before that, we were seeing a decrease every year. So the high prices have now gotten high enough to where producers like me have decided it's worth it to keep the females and build the cow herd. Mm-hmm. So the cattle operate in a cycle, just like any other business, and that cycle has highs and lows. But our cow cycles used to be on like a 4 to 6 year term. Now they're more on a 7 or 8 year term, and we've had good pricing now for probably 3 years, and probably are going to have it for another 2 or 3.
But for me to sit here and ask you how it looks down the road, obviously you're going to have to predict the weather. You're going to have to predict a lot of things.
No, but I do
can't
predict
control.
this. My prediction is that the cattle business is going to be good for some time, because in the headlines of the paper they're talking about the silver tsunami. So
We're getting there.
I'm participating in the silver tsunami, but because of the age of a lot of our farmers, a lot of young people, now there are young people coming in, and they're coming in at a good time at some aspects, bad if you're talking about how much it costs the investment, but the profitability and the long range forecast for the cattle business is pretty good. So it's a good time to get in the business or to slightly expand. But our group of core farmers is probably getting a little older.
Well, that's what I'm going to ask you. You just mentioned people coming into Are there younger people getting into the farming business?
You know, we've got in our area of the county where I live, you know, we've got several people that are in their 30s and 40s that are pursuing ag careers. And then right here in town, we've got several young farmers that are pursuing some of the ag businesses and then farming on the side.
Mm-hmm. Well, agriculture, like I said, it's a big bit. When you go to college they're teaching a lot more things than raising cattle. I mean, there's a lot. Agribusiness is a huge market. Obviously, is that where they're coming from, or how do you recruit a farmer?
Well, some of it is from their growing up.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they knew. Think about our grandparents and on back, everybody was raised on the farm, right? I mean, that's the way it was. So now we have fewer and fewer people who are actually raised on the farm, but everybody's attracted to it because of the persona and, you know, and it's the I guess the romance. But it's a lot of hard work.
Absolutely.
And it takes some knowledge. If you're going to be successful financially and otherwise at farming, you're going to have to educate yourself and make sure you know what you're doing, because equipment, land, the livestock, the buildings is all a tremendous investment.
Yeah.
And you need to watch your P's and Q's and make sure you're doing what needs to be done to ensure that you've got an opportunity to be profitable.
Yeah, well, I was raised on a small farm, but I'll tell you, it was hard work then. I said I'd never do it unless I was doing it for myself when I got older. Right. But the technology today is just so much different than it was back when we were kids.
And even with you think that an animal's an animal, but the technology in breeding has advanced in the last 20 years that it really would blow your mind if you haven't been around it. And I'm talking about the ability to predict an animal's performance. Mm-hmm. The hog industry is one area that has made tremendous strides, and chicken as well, but beef has done the same. And using animal and their pedigree and their performance of ancestors to predict the performance of the future. And when you talk about growth rate, milking ability of cows, longevity of cows, and the docility, most of these breeds have a docility EPD. EPD stands for expected progeny difference. That's predicting what the offspring are going to do. Well, docility is how tame something is.
Yeah.
Okay? We've all had a dog or a cat that had a bad disposition, or maybe not your kid, but you've seen a kid in the public that has a bad personality.
Your kid's a good one.
Your kids are fine. But animals have the same tendencies, and there's, whether it's in cattle, horses, or hogs, you're going to have certain breed lines that have a better, they cooperate more, so they're easier to handle. And cattle are the same way, and that is one of the EPDs. So they're not only trying to predict birth weight, weaning weight, milking ability, marbling, the size of a ribeye is a genetic factor that can be predicted, but now the docility or the easy handling of the animal is also
I had an old Angus bull that never liked me much when I was a kid, and I don't think I liked him much either.
And most people don't realize that, you know, through the extension service and some of the schools, I'll have 4 or 5 groups out to the farm every year. And everybody thinks that the bull's the biggest, baddest son of a gun on the farm. And I'm going to tell you right now, the most rambunctious animal on a farm is a mama cow about 12 to 24 hours after that calf's been born. That's what you don't want to mess with her. The bulls are fine. Most of my bulls, once they get 2 or 3 years old and out of the playing stage, they're the gentlest animal on the field,
Yeah.
on the farm. I mean, I've had bulls 4 or 5 years old that you can load on a truck in the middle of the field. So.
Well, one of the things that scares me about the farming business or anything else is land. You see it every day. I live right across the road from a huge farm, but my fear is when that family passes away or sells, it's going to become a subdivision.
And see, it's hard for me to dictate to that landowner what they should or shouldn't do because he has spent generations. That farm's been in the family for generations.
It has been.
And when he passes or when that landowner goes and the family has to make that tough decision, how do we maintain the land or how do we maximize our profit and how do we do what's financially sound for the family?
Yeah.
And I hate to put restrictions on someone because they worked hard for that. It's theirs. They should have the right to do that in the way that best suits their family needs. But you also hate to see the farms disappear. I made a conscious decision of putting farms back together in my little area to have it to where I can raise cattle because cattle take a lot of land.
And it's going to change the attitudes of farmers as well. Obviously, produce more with less lands, and again, I guess where technology.
That's where the technology has become very efficient because through breeding and selective breeding, you can select animals that are much more efficient use of the feed. But you can also, and this is where they think grass is grass. Okay, when we bring Ron Bowman for the Extension Service and Robbie, and we bring groups out to the farm, one of the things I tell them is that grass is something you mow in your yard, and creeping red from fine lawn to turf and this, but I've got 20 some varieties of what you call grass on my farm, and they all have different purposes, okay? And a lot of them have been genetically selected for productivity, drought resistance, high protein levels, palatability, so that the animal, not only does it need to be good, but the animal needs to want to eat it, okay? So between your fescues and the fungus issue with fescues to orchard grasses that will survive grazing to clovers and alfalfas that will survive grazing and hay making, the genetic improvements there is outstanding, and you can't fathom it unless you saw it 40 or 50 years ago and then can see it today.
We talk about grain as well. Now, obviously, is your grain primarily for feeding your cattle, or is it?
I actually do not raise any grain. Everything I do is pasture and hay that runs through the cow to produce that calf for a breeding bull or a female. Now, the grains have made tremendous genetic improvements. When I talk to some of these groups, there's a chart that starts in Nelson County in 1919 and goes to today. And I'll ask them, I said, do you think we are farming and raising more grain, corn, wheat, and soybeans today than we did in 1919? What would your answer to that be?
I'd say we are. But
we most certainly are.
Yeah.
And the reason is the technology. All right, in 1919, of course, we didn't have the equipment.
Yeah.
We've got combines that can harvest an acre of land in 15 minutes, okay? In 1919, it took a week to harvest an acre of land. So we've got the technology to allow us to cover more ground, but we've also got the technology to help us use more land at one time. Most farms, when your grandfather and my grandfather farmed, they might have had 50 acres that was used to produce grain, but they used 10 of it this year and 20 of it next year and rotated it out because fertility was hard to maintain. And now we've got the ability to maintain fertility and also maintain the soil through soil conservation methods, through no-tilling and the way that we manage the land. So there's been tremendous improvements, and we are farming by far more acreage in 2015 than we were in 1919. In 100 years, we're farming more croppable acres in Nelson County than we ever did.
Well, I know that what you said there was promising earlier about people getting into it, and if you have recommendations to somebody out there right now that's thinking about looking for a career, is farming FFA? What is it they should be looking to do right now?
Well, of course, FFA is good in the schools to help point the kids toward the right direction.
Right.
And of course, I have a degree in agriculture. My wife has a degree in agriculture. Now, is that mandatory? No. There's a lot of fine people that are doing a tremendous job and making a lot of money on a farm that didn't go to college.
Yeah.
But the thing college did for me, it helped me look at different avenues and not to be afraid to try something new. I mean, that's one thing, whether it's military training or the college, if you're open to trying something new, I'm not saying you take everything 100% every year and change it.
Yeah.
But if something new comes available, try a little bit of it and try to work it into your system. But if someone were, if young people today are saying, how can I get into farming? There's a lot of ways to look at that, and some of them are easier than others. But you need to start out, maybe you got somebody that can help you, or you start out working with somebody.
Yeah.
If you have to go out and buy all the land, all the equipment, whether it's animals, it's hard to do because of the financial
Yeah.
responsibility there.
Absolutely. Now, you're still in the farming business not only as a farmer, but you insure farms as a
Certainly.
Kentucky
Yeah,
Farm Bureau
I
agent.
work for Kentucky Farm Bureau Insurance. I'm an agency manager here at one of the Nelson County offices, and we work with farms and farm families daily, as well as homeowners and that type thing. And so it gives me, an opportunity to kind of look at it from both sides. And I have people that come and say, hey, what would you do in this situation, or what's something that I could do to help my farming operation? And of course, one of the things I do is sell bulls. I met at lunch today. I went home and met with a guy that's a repeat bull customer, and he came out. And I called the bulls up to the feeder in the bunk area there, and we went over and talked about him, and he picked him out a bull.
Yeah.
So my job gives me the freedom to kind of work both sides of it. And Farm Bureau is a family farm organization, more rural type deal. They started in the early 1900s to enhance rural lifestyles, and the insurance part of it came about in 1944 because the Farm Bureau organization realized that some of these rural farm families didn't have access to the insurance products that people that lived in town. So Farm Bureau started selling
And you
insurance.
understand the farmer. I mean, somebody that's never been on a farm would probably have a real hard time understanding what a farmer means when they come in and ask a question.
Well, especially with some of the new stuff. These grain handling operations, when you get into these large bins and the grain handling operations with the you can have hundreds of thousands of dollars tied up in this equipment, and you need somebody that kind of understands what they're talking about when they come in and say, I've got an 8-row corn head, or I've got a 30-foot soybean reel, or I'm looking at a sprayer, and you think, well, a sprayer, and he says, well, but my sprayer costs $380,000. Well, I can see it. I know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And the GPS and the auto steer and the technology that's a part of this equipment is awesome.
Yeah.
So it helps to have a fundamental understanding. I can't go out and operate them, okay? My brother-in-law, he's got combines and sprayers down there, and I can assure you he's not going to let me get in one and drive it. But I have a basic understanding, yes.
Now, your office located up by Medica Pharmacy there in
we're on
Bardstown.
at 202 West Stephen Foster, Suite A, and we're actually in the process of building a brand new building out on 245.
Uh-huh.
So when I was promoted agency manager after Jack Allen retired, after 51 years of dedicated service, the decision was made to kind of split the business up, and we're renting temporary until we can get a new building built.
So if somebody wants to have some questions about farming, get into the farming business, you're available if somebody wants to give you a call or stop by.
I talk to people all the time about it, and I enjoy it and look forward to it. And if I don't have the answer, I can get you to the right place.
All right. Well, Adam Wheatley here from Kentucky Farm Bureau. And Adam, appreciate you stopping by. And I think we've learned a lot here today. Like I said, the farming business is not what it was years ago, but what is. So
That's exactly right.
Everything has advanced over the years. And thank God for farmers, because I know when I go, a lot of kids think that milk comes from Kroger. So I don't know.
It is amazing what people think and believe. But I mean, we're soon going to have to feed 7 billion people on this planet, and we're going to have to depend on somebody to do it. Do we want people here in our own hometown, in our own local community, producing food that we can consume, or do we want to rely on someone in another country that we have no oversight? We don't know what they're doing, how they're using it, and the circumstances. And a solid, safe, reliable food product is something we cannot take for granted.
Exactly. Food's pretty important to us
better
right
believe
now.
it.
So
I eat every day.
I pretty much try to. And I think you do too. So we thank you again, Adam, for being here. We thank you for listening and tuning in. We'll be back here with more community focus here on Central Kentucky TV, Channel 6, just a few minutes. Be right back.